Hey folks, it's Chris Thoreau here, and today I'm going to show you and talk about what I would call the perfect tray of wheatgrass. Now, I'm not sure if anything's going to come out of this other than me bragging about having just grown the perfect tray of wheatgrass, but hopefully something useful comes out of it to give you some insight into growing this particular crop. Now, wheatgrass is something a lot of microgreens growers grow. It grows in the same system on the same cycle. The differentiating thing about wheatgrass is you don't eat it fresh, you juice it and drink the juice. So I'll talk a little bit about the growing conditions here. So I'm growing in a 1 inch deep tray. This is the heavy duty tray from Bootstrap Farmer. I'm using an organic veggie mix, so it's just a sort of a peat perlite with a bit of compost mix. My seeding density was 175 grams of seed, so keep that in mind in terms of how much seed you use. And this is a hard red spring wheat. So just to give you some of the figures, this is the end of day 7. Okay, so think about that. This is the end of 7 days of growth. If you've seen me talk about my system before at home, I do have a heating pad here underneath. I do not use the heating pad for wheatgrass. Now, when I talk about growing microgreens, I really push growing in a high temperature system, which shortens your crop cycle. Now, wheatgrass is a crop that does better in cooler conditions. So we have a really nice spring here in Vancouver right now. We're getting lots of sunlight, so I'm getting lots of natural light coming in through the window. And then I've got my cool white lights here at 6500 K. You can see this is growing right up after only 4 days uncovered to be right at the my light level, and I could lower it down a little because I've got a 2 inch tray under here, so I've got some flexibility there. Let's take a look at this guy. So the tray itself is exactly 7 inches tall, so this is about the height you're looking for. Now the key thing with wheatgrass, I find, is now you want to get it as tall as possible in order to get as much yield out of your plants as you can. However, if you let it go too long to get more height, what's going to happen is your crop is going to get disgustingly bitter. So at this height right here, and after 7 days, I know I've got the perfect wheatgrass crop right here. So you can see from the top, super uniform, super full. I'm really happy with that seeding density. I maybe could have gone even a little closer to the edges there, but keeping it like this makes sure I get really, really good germination. This was watered once on germination and once on about its 2nd day of being uncovered, and that's it. The seed itself got about an hour and a half to 2 hours of soaking. So to grow this, almost perfect tray of wheatgrass, just nothing's really perfect. It took very little effort, and where the effort goes into is your preparation and your timing. So making sure you've got your seeding rate right, you've got the right amount of water in the soil when it goes to germination. Actually, I probably gave it a little bit of water when I uncovered it, because I usually do that, but I only gave it a water bath once. So I've only had to interact with the crop a couple of times. And so this is one of the things that makes growing crops easy, is you're not dealing with them all the time. So what I try to say to both home and commercial growers is, you want to do as little work as possible to get as much done as you can. Now, you can interpret that in different ways. You just have to make sure you're understanding that you still need to do a very good job. And so what I'm trying to get across with that is, don't do work that you don't have to do. A lot of people like to soak their seeds for 24 hours and rinse them twice. Well, that's not going to get you a better crop. All it's doing is making more work for yourself. So I find the less I interact with a crop across the board, the better the crop is going to turn out, because there's less chance for me to screw it up. Okay, so this is basically our perfect tray of wheatgrass. What I'm going to do now is actually cut it to see what our yield is there, to see what kind of yield we're getting from 175 grams of seed. So as I've talked about before, I always cut with a very sharp knife, especially wheatgrass. It cuts really well. I haven't sharpened this one in a while, but I keep it well honed. I've got my scale and a little thing right here just off camera. So I'm going to give this a cut and just see what kind of yield we're getting. So you can see the knife is cutting through there really, really easily. And what I do is I keep it really nice and close to the soil surface, keep it nice and flat. So you can see I'll give you a look at this here, that I'm able to cut that very, very, very long. So I'm only leaving a tiny little bit at the bottom there. And so this means I'm going to be able to maximize my yield just by having a good cut. And this is something you need to keep in mind with any crop. The key here is keeping your blade straight, and to simplify it, if you imagine your blade handle sitting on here, it's going to keep the blade up just a little bit. So it actually really makes things quite easy here. So coming right down. Sorry I'm going so slow. If this was a commercial system, we'd be going super fast, but I'm not set up for that. And so, yeah, there we go. Okay, I thought that container would be big enough, but it's clearly not. And my yield on that one is just under 400 grams, so 390 grams on that one. So we're getting less than a pound of wheatgrass off this tray. Could probably throw a little bit more on there, which is fairly standard. I find around 400 grams is what we're getting. Sometimes get up to a pound, and can easily get a pound or more than a pound. What I find is, once again, if the crop gets too mature, it's going to start to get bitter. And if you drink a lot of wheatgrass, sweet wheatgrass is almost tolerable. Bitter wheatgrass is like, it's like drinking the worst thing ever. So the timing is really important to make sure your customer isn't buying the wheatgrass. Your customer is buying the juice. Your wheatgrass tray can look beautiful and get a super good yield, but if the juice that comes out of it is unpalatable, you're not going to get a lot of return business on that. So you might get a slightly lower yield at 400 grams, but you're going to get a much better return rate, I think, for your customers. So one thing we'll take a look at here, just because we've got the tray out and I've got your attention, I've always been intrigued with the root mat of crops. So what we'll do is just kind of pull this out, and you'll know if you grow wheatgrass how easy this is going to come out of here as one piece. So this is our roots. So this is 7 days of crops. What you can see is the roots are basically, you can see them coming down here. You can get a nice profile there. Get a little bit closer to you there. So you can see the roots go down, not as much on the edge because we didn't have seed right on the edge. But the roots, once they hit the bottom, they start going sideways, and they really, like, this is super solid. Like, these roots are basically almost like a single organism in here. You can see here, if you're wondering, this is where they've managed to poke through the holes, the drainage holes in the bottom of the tray. So there's a super dense root mat in here, and this is another indication that there's not a lot of growing time left for this crop either. There's not a lot of soil in there for this to root into. So it's just nice to sort of find that sweet spot, end your growing cycle, and yeah, you get a nice root mat. This for me goes into compost. I'll never see it again. But for this, for growers, if you've got some soil that you can, if you're growing ground crops and you've got some soil where you're growing other stuff, you can use these as a mulch. You can place it upside down in the summer. It'll decompose in place. You can add it to your compost system. And just seeing the comment there about speckled pea roots, they're almost exactly the same. The speckled pea roots, if I remember, because I haven't grown them for a few years, are a little bit thicker, but same thing. And they will actually, they will fill even more of the soil than the wheatgrass. The peas are super vigorous. So yeah, so that's a little bit of insight into the perfect tray of wheatgrass. So once again, we used about 175 grams of seed, soaked them for 2 hours in warm water. You could probably soak them less or even a little more if you're doing other things. So just keep that as your sort of average time. You can probably go as low as 20 minutes. Just don't keep them in there too long or they're going to run out of oxygen. I use just an organic veggie mix, which is a peat, perlite, and compost mixture in a 1-inch bootstrap farmer tray. I kept them covered for about 3.5 days, then in the light for 3.5 days. This is the end of day 7. Our end crop ended up being 7 inches tall, and we got about a 400 gram yield on there. So it's a pretty good indicator of what a really good wheatgrass cycle should look like. Keeping in mind, wheatgrass likes cooler conditions. So as I talked about, I did not use my heating pad for that. I will use this for all my sunflower all the time. They love it, but wheatgrass doesn't need it. So Yeah, if you're into wheatgrass, even just for yourself, it's probably one of the easiest things you'll ever grow. I will. It's evening here. I won't have any of this tonight, but I'll have it in morning with a espresso chaser. So that's some insights into growing wheatgrass. Keep that in mind for your next crop. Hopefully, some of those tips in there will help you out, and I'll try to get some more videos out to you folks soon.